An investigation into Noosa's two-headed fish has proved inconclusive. A task force examining fish deformities and fatalities at the Sunland hatchery released its final report this week. Predictably, opinions were divided about the extent to which agricultural chemicals were to blame, with suggestions that the deformities could be the result of disease, water quality and hatchery practices. Nonetheless, the task force has recommended further research, as Peter McCutcheon reports.
It's the stuff of nightmares, deformities and deaths, and no definitive explanation.
We may never know what caused the deaths and the abnormalities in fish stocks.
A special task force report into fish deformities at a Noosa hatchery was released this week, but the report raises as many questions as it attempts to answer.
The overall conclusion from the investigations was that the evidence was not sufficient to determine a causal link between chemicals and fish health problems. For some incidents, a combination of factors were identified that could have contributed to the impact observed, but again, the evidence was not definitive.
Well, I think it does make it difficult for the community to understand the problems.
The 7:30 report visited the Sunland fish hatchery 12 months ago. Owner Gwen Gilson was busy cleaning her equipment, fearing that chemical drift from a neighbouring macadamia farm was poisoning her stocks.
It must be very frustrating.
Yeah, it's absolutely devastating.
A special state government task force was set up in 2009 to look into allegations that chemicals were to blame for two-headed fish and other deformities at Sunland over the previous 3 years. But the investigating team was split.
There were different opinions between members of the task force and between members of the scientific subcommittee. We'll obviously start to work...
Jim Thompson from Biosecurity Queensland chaired the task force.
In reaching my conclusion as chair of the task force, I relied heavily on the documented opinion of the chair of the scientific subcommittee and agreed that the weight of evidence did not establish a causal link between chemical use and fish health problems.
Nonetheless, the scientific subcommittee didn't dismiss chemicals altogether, describing the connection between agricultural spray drift and fish deformities as plausible but unproven.
There is a chance that chemicals may have been involved in some but not all of the observed events, and that the chemicals may have come from the neighbouring macadamia farm.
Scientists, however, were more willing to dismiss the theory that chemical contamination of wild fish stocks could have come from the Noosa River.
It is difficult to support the hypothesis that chemicals in the Noosa River are affecting fish in the river to the extent that their reproductive processes are significantly impaired.
It's quite common in both human medicine and veterinary science not to be 100% definitive, that word meaning that we are absolutely 100% sure about cause.
Matt Landos is one of 2 veterinarians on the task force that believes, on balance, agricultural chemicals are likely to be the cause of the deformities.
One of the avenues of exposure is through a chemical spray drift from the neighbouring farm. There are other mechanisms, however, that are important, one of which is movement of volatising chemicals, or the vapour. When chemicals evaporate after they've been applied, this can take place for some days after they've been applied.
Despite disagreement, the task force did agree on some things. There was no evidence the neighbouring farm had done anything illegal or improper. And the task force agreed on a set of recommendations to conduct further research and monitoring and to improve government processes for the management of spray drift.
We'll now work with industry organisations and scientific organisations to do further research into the impacts of chemicals on our native fish. Often with research, the complexities, there's often a divergence of views between scientists, but through a process of research we undertake peer review. Hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it at some stage.
The Minister's support for research, I applaud that there are certainly gaps in knowledge, and further research will highlight the problems which this fish hatchery is showing. We know most likely the cause, so let's get on and start supporting a change to practices to stop these problems happening in the future.